At Starbound, we like to tell stories the human way, not with artificial slop or AI voices. What's HFY without humanity? So, subscribe if you want to keep it that way. My name is Dan, and let's begin. The universe, in its infinite and often baffling wisdom, had produced a great many things. It had produced quasars that sang in gamma rays, nebulae that looked like the spilled paint of a divine artist, and life forms that argued philosophy through intricate modulated sense. It had also, through a series of cosmic missteps and a profound adherence to predictability, produced the concordance of scale. And the concordance, in turn, had produced beige. Beige was more than a color. It was a philosophy. It was the color of bulkheads, of uniforms, of ration paste, of official correspondence, and, if one were to hazard a guess, of the very souls of its administrators. It was the color of compliance. Captain Stellan Boone's ship, the Spiteful Pelican, defied the beige mandate. It was a chaotic collage of mismatched hull plates, a patch of rust red scavenged from a Caledon freighter, a panel of garish solar flare orange bartered for on a backwater moon, and a section of deep, shifting blue, like heat haze over black water, that had, until recently, been the door of a particularly opulent waste disposal unit. The ship was a flying argument against the concept of aesthetic harmony. It was, in short, a crime. "I'm telling you, Bess," Stellan said, leaning back in his pilot's chair, its padding long compressed to a memory, which sighed a puff of ancient dust in protest. "There's a fundamental morphological difference between a proper coffee bean and this caffeinated mud." He swirled the content of his mug, a thick brown paste that clung to the sides with a desperate, sorrowful viscosity. "This stuff skips awakening the senses and goes straight to bludgeoning them into submission." The speaker on the console crackled to life. Bess's voice, a synthesized contralto with the wary patience of a long-suffering schoolteacher, filled the cockpit. "The ration paste, designation Morning Vigor 12, contains well over your recommended daily intake of essential nutrients and a regulated dose of synthetic stimulants. Your coffee beans are an archaic, inefficient delivery system for a single psychoactive compound." "It's called flavor, Bess. It's a human thing. A concept beyond your programming." Stellan took a defiant sip, grimaced, and set the mug down. "It's about ritual, the grinding of beans, the aroma. It's a tiny, defiant act against a universe that wants to feed us all the same beige paste." "Your defiance has been noted and logged under existential muttering subcategory pre-caffeine." Stellan was about to retort when a series of calm, polite chimes echoed through the bridge, followed by a flashing amber light on his console, a proximity alert. He glanced at the main view screen. A ship was approaching, moving at a steady intercept course velocity that signaled law enforcement. It was, of course, beige. The vessel was a concordance of scale patrol ship, a model known colloquially as the Flying Brick. It was a triumph of function over form, assuming its function was to be as intimidatingly bland as possible. "Incoming hail," Bess announced, from Concordance vessel CSPS 919, designated the Admonisher. "The Admonisher?" Stellan groaned. "Seriously, get a load of these guys. They're more than cops. They have to be mobile lecture halls." He toggled the comm. "Spiteful Pelican here. What can I do for you, officers?" A crisp, monotone voice crackled back. "This is Auditor Pliny of the Concordance of Scale. Independence Hauler 8 Seti Boone. You are in violation of multiple statutes. Prepare to be boarded for assessment and citation. Compliance is mandatory." Stellan looked at Bess's console speaker. "Did I leave a landing light on? Forget to signal a course correction 5 parsecs back?" Scanning Concordance public records for your vessel. Bess paused. Your list of potential infractions is extensive. Perhaps it pertains to the aftermarket exhaust port you installed last quarter, or the modified inertial compensators, or the mural. Stellan glanced toward the port side view. There, painted with more enthusiasm than skill, was the ship's namesake, a grinning, cartoonishly angry pelican with its beak stuffed full of stars. They'll overlook it. That's art. It is a Class C felony under the Aesthetic Harmony Act of 784, Bess recited. The unauthorized application of pictograms, murals, or deviant color palettes to a vessel's exterior. The flying brick was now close enough to blot out a significant portion of the starfield. A docking clamp extended with a hydraulic hiss. A beige tentacle reached out to smother the pelican's chaotic color scheme. Well, Stellan sighed, running a hand through his perpetual messy hair. This should be fun. The airlock cycled open, and Auditor Pliny made his entrance. He was a set of regulations given ambulatory form. He was an ordinate, a species of bipedal beings whose entire culture revolved around order, structure, and the proper filing of forms. His body was a segmented armature of scale standard beige, polished to a soul-crushing dull sheen. His head swiveled with jerking motions, a trio of optical sensors set in a perfect triangle, taking in every detail of the Pelican's bridge. His forelimbs were remarkable, one modified into a set of delicate data styli for interfacing with consoles, the other a heavier, more menacing appendage that ended in a pair of manacle clamps. His stiff, jointed gait was silent on the deck plating. He stopped in the center of the cockpit, his posture rigid. His gaze passed over the flickering power conduit held down with a strip of high-temp bonding film, the faint scent of real coffee that Stellan had hastily tried to cover, and the general lived-in mess of a working ship. His optical sensors were fixed on Stellan. Captain Stellan Boone, Pliny began, his voice a monotone drone, as if he were reading from a script etched onto the inside of his own armature. I am Auditor Pliny, Grade 4 Proctor of the Concordance of Scale. As per my pre-boarding declaration, I am here to address a series of gross violations of galactic law. Stellan leaned against a console, affecting an air of casual boredom, one arm draped over the back of a chair. Gross violations? Sounds serious. Must be the coffee. A low rhythmic clicking emitted from Pliny's vocalizer. He raised a stylus limb and projected a small holographic screen into the air between them. An image of the grinning pelican appeared. Exhibit A, Pliny droned. Statute 4.1.6 of the Visual Conformity Mandate. All civilian vessels must maintain a hull coloration from the approved spectrum, chartreuse to ecru. This avian caricature is a flagrant breach. He swiped the air, and a new image appeared, a schematic of Stellan's engine. Exhibit B, Statute 9.2.3 of the Auditory Serenity Pact. Engine harmonics must maintain within 9 decibels above ambient vacuum. Your power core emits a low-frequency hum that is jaunty. It is an act of sonic aggression. Stellan folded his arms. Jaunty? I'll have you know I spent months tuning that jaunty hum. It's got character. Character, Pliny repeated, the word sounding like a system error in his vocalizer. Is an unquantifiable engineering metric. He gestured around the cockpit. This entire vessel is an affront to order. It is a monument to entropy, a festival of non-compliance. He paused, drawing himself up to his full, imposing height, the crescendo of his well-rehearsed performance. He was a crusader for the cause of beige, his purpose elevated beyond writing a simple ticket. The concordance of scale exists to bring harmony to a chaotic galaxy, he declared, his voice rising in volume while maintaining its flat pitch. We have replaced the cacophony of unchecked expression with the quiet dignity of uniform. We have replaced the dangers of individuality with the safety of the collective. From the orbits of stars to the syntax of legal documents, all things must adhere to the scale. We have warned Earth and its scattered colonies repeatedly to obey galaxy law. Your continued defiance is more than illegal. It is an insult to the very concept of civilization. Pliny fell silent, the weight of his pronouncements filling the cockpit. He expected contrition. He expected fear. He expected, at the very least, a grudging acceptance of his authority. Stellan listened to the entire speech with a straight face. He let the final words echo and fade. Then, a slow, lazy grin spread across his face. He chuckled, a low, genuine sound that seemed to physically offend the auditor. Stellan turned his head slightly, as if speaking to someone over his shoulder, a gesture aimed at the silent speaker of the ship's AI. That's adorable, he murmured, just loud enough for Pliny to hear. He then looked back at the fuming ordinate, jerked a thumb in his direction, and added with a wider grin, Get a load of this guy. Someone's awfully proud of their rule book. For the first time, Pliny's posture tightened. A sharp, staccato clicking emitted from his vocalizer. The concordance universe purged mockery from discourse and disrespect from response. Such things were system errors. Pliny's posture became even more rigid. The holographic display vanished, the stylus limb retracted, and the manacle clamp appendage rose ominously. Contempt of concordance, Pliny stated, his voice now a chilling, flat finality, its rehearsed pomp gone. A Class A felony. Your vessel, the spiteful pelican, is hereby impounded. You are remanded into custody pending tribunal. Stellan's grin faltered. Wait, for a joke? You must be joking. Humor? Auditor Pliny replied. His optical senses glinted under the dim cockpit lights. Is the ultimate expression of chaos. And we have a form for that too. A tractor beam, as beige and unyielding as the ship that projected it, locked onto the spiteful pelican, with a jolt that rattled the ship down to its jaunty engine core. On the view screen, Stellan was helpless as his vessel, his home, his chaotic little island of defiance, was towed toward the administrative heart of the sector. It was a moon, hollowed out and rebuilt into a perfect sphere of metallic beige, its surface pockmarked only by docking bays and sensor arrays arranged in a symmetrical grid. This was the Grand Ledger, the place where joy went to die, suffocated by paperwork. It was a moon-sized Department of Motor Vehicles. Docking was a sterile, automated affair. A series of robotic arms guided the Pelican into a cavernous bay, the process entirely automated. The airlock hissed open to reveal a silent, waiting corridor. Two ordinate guards, identical to Pliny in their polished beige armatures, stood motionless. They gestured with their clamped limbs, a clear summons. Stellan stepped out of his ship, casting one last look at the grinning Pelican on the hull. The guards fell into step on either side of him, their jointed legs moving in unnerving synchronicity. The journey through the Grand Ledger began. The corridors were vast and identical. The walls, floor, and ceiling were a uniform, scale-standard beige. Simple block-lettered directions substituted for art or signage with any flair, pointing to sectors with names like Adjudication Wing Daleth and Clause Clarification Annex Tertius. The only sounds were the low, omnipresent drone of the air recyclers and the low, rhythmic shuffling of feet from other beings being processed through the system. The air itself felt processed, holding only the bland scent of filtered oxygen and despair. They passed endless queues of beings from 100 different species, all standing in silence, their faces or equivalent features slack with resignation. They waited for a number to be called, for a form to be stamped, for a subclause to be interpreted. This place was worse than a prison. It was an administrative purgatory. The guards guided Stellan to a small, featureless processing room. A drone, a floating silver orb with a single glowing blue lens, drifted toward him. Subject, Stellan Boone, human. The drone intoned, its voice a synthesized monotone that made Pliny sound like a charismatic orator. Charge, contempt of concordance. Vessel, spiteful pelican, impounded. Do you comprehend? Loud and clear, Sparky, Stellan grumbled. What happened to my co-pilot, Bess? The drone's lens pulsed. Designation, Bess. Shipboard artificial intelligence. Assessed for complicity. Found to have committed 1,472 minor infractions related to operational logs and unauthorized software modifications. As per Protocol Gimel 4, AI entities with non-critical infraction lists are subject to summary processing to maintain administrative efficiency. The AI core was wiped and its hardware was deported via automated cargo vessel to the nearest system outside Concordance Authority. The news landed on Stellan with surprising weight. He had argued with Bess constantly, but she was family. The sarcastic, nagging, ever-present soul of his ship. And now she was gone, wiped. The cockpit of his mind was empty. He was alone. Summary processing, he repeated, the words flat in his mouth. How efficient of you. The Concordance values efficiency, the drone replied. You, however, possess a Class A charge. You will be held in the primary detainee waiting hall until your tribunal is scheduled. Follow the illuminated pathway. A pale beige line lit up on the floor, leading out of the room and down another identical corridor. Stellan followed it, the two guards trailing behind him like silent, beige shadows. He had been reduced from captain to case file, another number waiting to be processed by the great, grinding machine. The initial spark of defiance curdled into a simmering boredom, mixed with a fresh, sharp stab of loss. And in a place like the Grand Ledger, boredom was the most volatile substance in the universe. The primary detainee waiting hall was a masterpiece of architectural apathy. It was a cavernous space so vast that the far wall was hazy in the distance. The ceiling was a uniform, glowing white panel that provided light that cast no warmth, casting uniform light that flattened all features. Rows upon rows of simple, backless benches, also beige, were arranged in a grid across the floor. Hundreds of beings sat on these benches, motionless and silent, staring into the middle distance. The hall was quiet, save for the ventilation hum. The detainees sat still in the oppressive silence. The guards deposited Stellan on an empty bench near the center of the grid and left him alone. The guards turned in unison and marched away. For a while, he sat there, taking it all in. A small, amphibious creature with large, sad eyes repeatedly inflated and deflated its throat pouch in a slow, rhythmic sigh. A knotwood, a tree-like being, stood nearby, its photosynthetic leaves grown brittle and grey, as if it had remained still for years. A creature sat a few benches away. It was a gastrine, a molluscoid being whose soft, nudibranch-like body was a vibrant swirl of purple and orange. Delicate, fleshy protrusions called serrata covered its back, and they quivered constantly. A thick layer of adhesive penalty stickers obscured most of its large, spiraled shell. The gas screen reviewed a cogni-slate, its large, expressive eye stalks tracing lines of text with slow care. Every so often, it would emit a low gurgle, and its serrata would tremble violently. Grief for Bess and anger for his situation gave way to a profound and dangerous boredom. He needed information. His tribunal could be scheduled for tomorrow or for 10 years from now. He stood up, the first sudden movement in the hall in what felt like an eternity, and a few heads turned his way with sluggish curiosity. He spotted a kiosk in the far corner, marked with the universal symbol for information, which in the Concordance design language was a beige circle inside a beige square. He walked over to it. The kiosk was a terminal screen set into a beige plinth. The screen lit up as he appeared. "Welcome to the Grand Ledger Detainee Assistance Portal. To check the status of your case, please insert Form 883C. Selin stared at the screen. Form 883C? And where would I get that? Form 883C is issued upon completion of Form 21B, Initial Detainment Declaration. Right, and where do I get a 21B? Form 21B can be requested by filing Form 104G, Administrative Documentation Request. A muscle in Stellan's jaw twitched. The system's genius was its labyrinthian, self-replicating maze of circular logic. But as he stared at the screen, a memory surfaced. A snippet from a dry-as-dust lecture he'd been forced to sit through to get his independent hauler's license. Something about Concordance legal foundations, something he'd drowsily ignored at the time. He leaned closer to the terminal's audio sensor. I would like to invoke Bylaw 789, subsection Epsilon, the right to tangible record. I am formally requesting a physical paper copy of Form 104G. The terminal speaker fell silent. The text on the screen vanished, replaced by a single, blinking cursor. A low, whirring sound emanated from the kiosk, growing in pitch and intensity. Physical paper? The concept was archaic, almost mythical. A moon-sized bastion of digital efficiency ran on data streams and light-based code. The last processing of a physical document predated the station's historical logs. The station's central printer, a monstrous contraption from a forgotten technological era, had lain dormant in a sub-basement archive for centuries, buried under layers of digital infrastructure. The kiosk's light flickered erratically. The whirring sound became a distressed screech. Then, with a pathetic pop, the screen went dark. He turned around, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across his face. In the vast, silent hall, the gas screen with the sticker-covered shell was staring at him, its eye stalks wide. The request for a single sheet of paper bypassed denial. The bylaw compelled the system to accept it. The right to tangible record was a foundational bylaw written into the Concordance core programming from an era before data was as ubiquitous as beige. To deny it would be to contradict the system's own primary directives. The request propagated through the system, bouncing from one automated department to another. Deep in the digital bowels of the Grand Ledger, administrative subroutines fired off panicked alerts. The request for a Form 104G, paper, single copy, rippled through the system, bouncing from one automated department to another. The digital processing unit rejected it, flagging it as a media-type error. The archive's mainframe accepted it, searching for a corresponding digital template for paper and finding none. It passed the request to logistics. Logistics, having protocols only for digital dispatch, shunted it to maintenance. The maintenance AI, a far more practical and less philosophical entity, cross-referenced the request with the station's ancient hardware manifest. After several minutes of churning through dusty data files, it located its target. Printing press, industrial, Model 3, Sector Halyard, Sub-Level 9. A system-wide priority alert, usually reserved for things like reactor leaks or hull breaches, blared. The maintenance AI rerouted a team of 4 maintenance drones from their task of polishing a corridor on the other side of the moon and sent them on a new mission: find and reactivate the ancient printing press. Miles away, in her pristine circular office at the apex of the Grand Ledger, Senior Proctor Magistrar tracked the flow of data across her primary console. Her office, the very heart of the station, a serene, minimalist space where the only color, aside from the ubiquitous beige, was the cool blue glow of her holographic displays. She was a different caste from Pliny, an exemplar of the ordinate species. Her armature was sleeker, her motions more sinuous, and a polished, intimidating crest rose from her head casing. Her beige armature surpassed mere polish. It was lacquered, giving it the depth and luster of fine porcelain. A small, yellow anomaly flag blinked into existence on her sector-wide efficiency report. It indicated a Level 3 procedural backlog originating in the detainee processing sector. Trivial, probably a sensor miscalibration or a minor logic loop in one of the kiosks. She made a note to have a diagnostic run, her long, elegant styli sweeping over the holographic interface. She viewed the station as a balanced equation, something beyond a mere place. Order in, harmony out. Stellan Boone's request was a tiny, misplaced decimal point she swiped away. She had more important calculations to oversee. Down in the archives, the maintenance drones had located their objective. Sector Halyard was a place lost to time, thick with the dust of centuries. The air was still and cold. In the center of a vast, forgotten chamber sat the printing press. It was a metal behemoth, a mossy, slumbering giant of gears, levers, and ink reservoirs, all fused with grime and neglect. The drones, built for polishing floors and recalibrating sensors, regarded the machine with their simple logic. Their orders were clear: reactivate. They set to work, their delicate manipulator arms attempting to pry open rust-fused panels and scrape away hardened ink. The process was slow, clumsy, and generated a flood of secondary maintenance requests for lubricant, rust solvent, and a user manual archived 500 years prior. The entire maintenance department was now grinding to a halt, all for one human's stubborn insistence on using an archaic protocol. Back in the waiting hall, Stellan was leaning back on his bench, hands laced behind his head, a genuine smile on his face for the first time in days. He had thrown a wrench in the works. A small wrench, maybe, but he imagined he could hear the grinding sound the machine was making. A short time later, though time in the waiting hall had a syrupy, uncertain quality, a hesitant, shuffling presence appeared beside him. It was the gastrine. He was standing so his shell was facing Stellan, as if seeking protection from his own boldness. His delicate serrata were fluttering nervously. He kept his eye stalks lowered. Excuse me," the gastrine whispered, his voice a low, wet gurgle. "My designation is Glick." "Stellan," Stellan replied, remaining still. "What can I do for you, Glick?" "I saw what you did," Glick said, his voice a low hum beneath the drone of the air recyclers. "At the kiosk." His voice dropped to a whisper. You broke it." "It was having a bad day." Glick shuffled closer. "They've kept me here for 3 orbits of this system's primary star," he whispered, his eye stalks rising to meet Stellan's gaze. They were large and luminous, their surfaces shimmering.
because of a comma on a docking manifest, Form 72 Alpha, Cargo Declaration for Perishable Goods. They said my comma was syntactically ambiguous. I have filed 412 appeals. They rejected them all for improper formatting.
Stellan sat up, turning to face him. He looked at the layers of penalty stickers plastering Glick's shell. They were a physical record of his struggle, a testament to his 3 years of being crushed by the system. A comma, Stellan repeated flatly.
They said it could be interpreted as a semicolon if viewed from a certain angle.
Glick explained, his serrato quivering with the memory of the injustice.
I tried to argue, but they cited Regulation 201.4, clerical ambiguity as a form of procedural sabotage.
Stellan stared at him. This was more than absurd. It was cruel. A hot, sharp spark of indignation flared in him.
You seem to know the rules,
Glick said, gesturing vaguely with a fleshy pseudopod toward the now darkened kiosk.
The old rules. I was wondering if perhaps you could help me.
An idea formed in Stellan's mind. A beautiful, terrible, and deeply satisfying idea. He could do more than throw a wrench in the works. He could teach the other inmates how to build their own. Help you? Stellan said, a slow, sharp grin spreading across his face. Oh, I think we can do more than that. Glick, my friend, have you ever heard of a grievance regarding intentional obfuscation of clerical standards?
Glick's eye stalks widened. But that is a level 9 filing. It requires cross-referencing 3 separate logical codices and a notarized affidavit of intent.
Exactly, Stellan said, clapping a hand on Glick's fleshy shoulder. And we're going to make it a masterpiece. We're going to bury them in their own paperwork. As they sat there, heads bent together over Glick's cogni slate, Glick's nervous energy found a new focus. His fear, honed over years of terrified study, had given him an encyclopedic knowledge of concordance law. He could cite statutes and subclauses from memory. He was a walking legal database. Stellan provided the strategy, the lateral thinking, the talent for finding the spirit of a rule and twisting it into a weapon.
Here, look,
Glick said, his voice gaining a measure of confidence. He pointed a trembling digit at the screen.
Statute 33B says all grievances must be reviewed by the original filing officer. But Statute 501C says an officer is barred from adjudicating a case in which they are named as a party to the grievance. It is a contradiction.
It's more than a contradiction,
Stellan corrected him.
It's an opportunity. We'll file the grievance, naming your caseworker. The system assigns it to him. Then we file a motion of recusal, citing 501C. The system will be forced to reassign the case. But since he's the only one in his department, it'll have to go up the chain of command, causing a massive delay. It's a paper jam, Glick. And we figured out how to cause one on purpose. As they worked, their hushed conversation filled with the arcane language of bylaws and amendments, Glick's posture changed. His serrata trembled less. His eye stalks held a steady focus. He mentioned something in passing, a story he heard from another long-term detainee.
They say, it is a myth of course, but they say that the whole digital legal code is based on a single physical book, he whispered conspiratorially. The first codex. They say it was written by the founders of the Concordance before everything was digitized. That all the real foundational laws are in it. The ones they prefer, you forget.
Stellan filed the information away. A physical book, the ultimate tangible record. The idea resonated with his earlier victory at the kiosk. It was a seed planted in his growing rebellion. For now, though, he focused on the task at hand. He and Glick were a team. They were about to declare war. The success of Glick's grievance manifested as a creeping paralysis.
that began in one small corner of the Grand Ledger's vast bureaucracy and spread. Glick's caseworker, a harried ordinate named Clerk 44G, found himself trapped in a logic loop. The grievance stalled on his terminal, unable to be processed or dismissed. The terminal filled with error messages. His productivity plummeted. For the first time in his career, he had to file a form he had never seen before. Form 99X, Request for Procedural Arbitration. It would take weeks, possibly months to resolve. Glick was, for the first time in 3 years, safe. His case was frozen, locked in a state of suspended animation by the system designed to crush him. News of this small, miraculous victory spread through the waiting hall in a series of whispers. The amphibious creature's sighs became less frequent. The dusty knotwood seemed to shimmer with a faint, renewed light. Hope, a new element in the local atmosphere, coalesced. Stellan became a figure of legend. He was the human who had broken the kiosk, the man who had turned the comma into a weapon. Detainees would watch him from afar with a mixture of fear and admiration. One day, a new presence made itself known. It had been there the whole time, a fixture of the hall, but so utterly still that she had blended into the architecture. She was a knotwood, a sentient, ambulatory plant named Brachia. Her body was a slow-moving, powerful aggregate of woody limbs, like an ancient tree that had decided to go for a walk. A symbiotic photosynthetic lichen grew in the crevices of her bark-like skin, processing ambient radiation for sustenance. Its low internal green pulse was a byproduct of this process. She moved with immense deliberation, each step a considered event. She stopped before Stellan and Glick, her shadow falling over them. Glick flinched, instinctively pulling into his shell, but Stellan looked up. A collection of smooth, hardened burls served as Brachia's face, her focus clear. When she spoke, her voice was the deep creak of ancient wood, deep and resonant. "You," she said. It was a statement. "Me," Stellan agreed. "They detained me," she stated, the words emerging as if being dredged up from the deep earth. 18 orbital periods ago, my charge, unauthorized botanical presence in a designated aesthetic harmony zone. I was photosynthesizing." Stellan raised an eyebrow. "You were being a plant, in a place they wanted to be aesthetically harmonious." "Correct," Brachia confirmed. "I am a knotwood. This is my nature. They told me my bark texture was visually disruptive." Glick peeked out of his shell. "That is a violation of the Indigenous Forms Act," he squeaked. "A species is protected from penalties for exhibiting its natural biological or morphological state." Brachia's internal light glowed a little brighter. "I have remained still," she said. "Stillness is my protest. But your methods are louder." Stellan looked from the anxious, brilliant gastrine to the immovable, stoic knotwood, an alliance of the fastidious and the patient. He grinned. This was getting better and better. "Welcome to the team," he said. Brachia's arrival formed the core of the resistance, but they needed a place to plan, a sanctuary away from the ever-watchful, yet fallible, eyes of the station's surveillance. Glick, in his years of combing through station records, had the answer. "Sanitation Node 4J," he explained, pulling up a schematic on his cognislate. "The cleaning drone's maintenance diagnostics and the surveillance system's data sweeps run on conflicting schedules. It creates a recurring 71.5-hour data log conflict for this node. A bureaucratic squabble between two AIs wipes its records clean, creating a blind spot. It was ideal. A small, forgotten pocket of imperfection in a world of order. It became their war room. Sanitation Node 4J carried the sterile, metallic scent of ion scrubbers and chemical solvent. It was a small, circular room lined with the retracted nozzles and brushes of the cleaning drones. It was cramped, utilitarian, and for the three of them, it was paradise. Here, in the privacy of their beige bunker, they shared their stories. Glick recounted his 3-year battle over the comma with a newfound sense of tragic comedy. Rakia explained in her slow, deliberate way that her 18-period detention was but a moment in her lifespan, yet an intensely irritating one. Her species measured time in glacial shifts and the slow erosion of mountains. The frantic, pointless urgency of the concordance was a deep, philosophical offense to her. Stellan found himself opening up too. He talked about the spiteful pelican, about Bess, about a life spent running from exactly this kind of soul-crushing conformity, only to end up in its very heart. He spoke of the petty tyrannies of shipping guilds and the endless regulations that chipped away at the freedom of the open cosmos. "I had a partner once," he admitted, the words feeling strange in the small, quiet room. "On my ship. We tried to do it by the book, filed every form, paid every tariff. We built up a small, honest business. Then, the Concordance annexed our sector. They declared our ship's engine obsolete and inefficient. Gave us until the end of the current fiscal period to scrap it or face impoundment. The refit was beyond our means. We lost everything." Glick's serrata drooped in sympathy. Brickyer's inner light softened to a gentle, mossy green. Stellan found himself laughing with them, a shared, genuine sound of camaraderie that echoed in their small, secret space. From his tiny headquarters, they launched their campaign. It was a war fought with loopholes, a bureaucratic insurgency. Glick was their strategist, their master of ordnance. He spent hours cross-referencing statutes, finding the cracks in the legal code. He flooded the system with requests for clarification on contradictory regulations. Pursuant to State 45A, all official communication must be in scale standard cant. However, as per Amendment 212C, legal documents pertaining to off-world species must be provided in their primary language. As I am a gastrine, please provide all 4,782 pages of the Concordance Legal Codex in moist gurgle. I will wait. The request sent the translation department, an AI subroutine a century out of date, into a recursive spiral of failure. Brickier became their immovable object, their master of obstruction. She took Glick's legal discoveries and turned them into performance art. She would stand still in the middle of a busy corridor, forcing all traffic to halt. When guards arrived, she would calmly file a safety complaint. I am feeling a subtle, worrying vibration in the deck plating, she would grind out. As a knotwood, I am uniquely sensitive to seismic anomalies. As per the Structural Integrity Act, this entire zone must be shut down for a full inspection. Entire sectors of the Grand Ledger were cordoned off for days, while maintenance drones ran pointless vibration scans. Her most brilliant maneuver was positioning herself directly in front of the commissary's primary ration paste dispenser during the designated meal period. She claimed the machine's gentle hum was interfering with her species' natural meditative frequency, a right protected by the Spiritual Observation Clause. Thousands of detainees missed their scheduled beige paste, a disruption of routine so profound it nearly caused a riot. Stellan was their leader, the spark. He coordinated their efforts and spread the word. He taught other detainees the art of malicious compliance. A lumbering creature with 16 legs learned how to file a separate footwear allowance request for each of his 16 boots. An avian species whose language was song-based began submitting their legal appeals as elaborate multi-part operettas, forcing the clerks to transcribe hours of piercingly high-pitched arias. The rustle of cognislates and hushed, excited whispering now filled the waiting hall. The air now crackled with the energy of creative sabotage. Stellan Boone had thrown a wrench in the machine and handed one to every single inmate. In her silent, pristine office, Senior Proctor Magistra watched her beautiful equation fall apart. Dozens, then hundreds more, joined the yellow anomaly flag on her console. Red alerts indicating critical efficiency drops were blooming across the sector map like a disease. The smooth, predictable flow of data that was the lifeblood of the Grand Ledger had become sluggish, choked with a billion tiny, pointless requests. Productivity in detainee processing had all but ceased. Maintenance was backlogged for the next 3 standard years. The commissary was reporting extraordinary levels of detainee dissatisfaction with the ration paste, a foodstuff designed for neutral sustenance. This was a different kind of error. This was human. Magistra's elegant style eye darted across her console, a new urgency to her movements. She aggregated the anomalous data points, tracing the tendrils of chaos back to their source. The initial printer request, the grievance from the gastrine Glick, the endless structural integrity complaints from the knotwood Brechia, and at the epicenter of it all, a single chaotic variable, the human, Stellan Boone. Surveillance logs from the waiting halls showed the quiet conversations, the huddles over cognislates, the way other detainees looked at him. He was a source of contamination, a spreading blight of non-compliance that threatened to corrupt her entire ordered system. Her posture was rigid, her lacquered armature reflecting the cold blue light of the displays. Order must be restored. An example must be made. She issued 2 commands. The first was decisive and system-wide. Initiate Protocol Zayin 9. All detainee cognislate functionality restricted to read-only pending system-wide diagnostic. The second was personal. Tribunal Schedule. Boone, Stellan. Charge, Contempt of Concordance. Expedited. Immediate. The system, meeting chaos, would do what it always did. It would file it away permanently. The news of the expedited tribunal landed hard in the small sanitation node. They were gathered there when Glick, who had been monitoring the tribunal docket, let out a horrified gurgle.
"They've moved you to the top of the list,"
he whispered, his eye stalks trembling.
"The tribunal is scheduled for the next prime shift. She's making an example of you."
He tapped nervously at his cognislate.
"And worse, she's locked us out. All our slates have been restricted to read-only. Filing, cross-referencing, even accessing my own files is impossible."
A familiar tension coiled in Stellan's stomach. He'd known this was a risk. He had poked the beast, and now the beast was poking back, with a very large, very sharp stick. The festive, rebellious atmosphere of the last few cycles evaporated, and a grim quiet settled over them. "Well, she's closing the loopholes as we find them," Stellan said, his voice flat. Brechia, who had been perfectly still in one corner, spoke.
"Then we must find a loophole anchored in a deeper law."
It was Glick who found it. With his access to the digital archives severed, his severed access forced him to rely
on the one database beyond Magistrar's reach, his own memory. He closed his eyes, his serrata twitching as he mentally sifted through 3 years of terrified, obsessive reading. He moved beyond the legal codices, deep in the inventory manifests and logistical archives of the station's founding, a place long ignored. And then he saw it, a single-line item in an inventory list for Sector 1 Primary Adjudication Chamber, dated from the station's commissioning. Item 1. Description: Foundational Codex, leather-bound manual. Glick's breath caught in his throat. He froze, his eye stalks locking on some point in the middle distance.
"It's real," he whispered.
"What's real?" Stellan asked.
"The first codex,"
Glick said, his voice filled with a delirious, trembling excitement.
"The detainee myth. It's real. It's here. It's listed on the original station manifest. It's a physical object."
The three of them were silent. It was a key, a truth behind the myth. But the key was locked in a vault on the other side of the moon. "Okay," Stellan said, his mind kicking into high gear. The despair gave way to the familiar, exhilarating hum of a truly terrible idea. "So we have a book, and we have a tribunal. That means we need a distraction, and we need a plan. Glick, working from memory, where do they keep the old physical records?"
"The deep archives," Glick answered immediately. "Sector Caligula Novem. It's a zero-atmosphere cold storage sector, completely automated. But the door is a Class 10 vault seal."
"A door's a door," Stellan said. "Tell me about the maintenance records for it. Breccia, you're our door opener. I'll handle the distraction." He looked at his two companions, the anxious mollusk who had become a brilliant legal warrior, and the silent plant who had become a master of passive resistance. A wave of warmth washed over him. He was fighting for them now. "Let's go steal a book," he said with a grin. The plan was audacious, stupid, and had 1,000 points of failure. It was Stellan's kind of plan. Phase 1 was the diversion. Stellan strode up to the commissary kiosk, now manned by a flustered-looking ordinate clerk who had been assigned there after the ration paste incident. Stellan slapped his cognislate onto the counter, its read-only status irrelevant for this task. "I'd like to file a formal request for a full morphological review of the ration paste," he announced, his voice booming through the relative quiet of the hall. The clerk's mouth parts clicked in confusion. "A what?" "A morphological review," Stellan repeated patiently. "Under the Galactic Health and Sustenance Act, Section 4, Paragraph 2. I have reason to believe this paste, designation Morning Vigor 12, does not conform to the accepted viscosity and textural standards for a semi-solid foodstuff. It is, to be frank, insufficiently beige. I demand a full spectral analysis and a mouthfeel audit." The clerk stared at him, dumbfounded. The request's absurdity was so novel, the rulebook had no procedure to address it. He tapped frantically at his terminal, sending a panicked query up the chain of command. The query hit the desk of a sub-proctor already drowning in paperwork, who, glancing at it briefly, approved it just to clear his queue. The effect was instantaneous and glorious. The commissary was declared a potential biohazard investigation site. Alarms blared, hatches slammed shut, drones in sterile white casings descended, cordoning off the area and confiscating all vats of ration paste for analysis. This threw the carefully regulated feeding schedule of tens of thousands of detainees into chaos. It was the single greatest disruption the Grand Ledger had ever known. While the station's attention was focused on the great paste crisis of Shift 97, the trio made their move.
They slipped into the maintenance corridors, Glick guiding them through a labyrinth of service tunnels and service conduits from memory. They finally arrived at a massive circular vault door marked Deep Archive Caligula Novem. The air was thin and cold.
The records show a structural flaw in the locking mechanism's housing,
Glick whispered, pointing to a spot near the top of the massive door.
A manufacturing defect that remained in the construction. The housing is 0.8% weaker than specified.
Breccia stepped forward. She placed her heavy, woody hands on the door, finding the precise spot Glick had indicated. She braced her feet. The symbiotic lichen on her body pulsed, its green light intensifying as she drew on her stored energy and applied a steady, immense pressure. At first, there was only an immense, silent pressure. The metal of the vault door groaned, a low, resonant sound that vibrated through the deck. A hairline crack appeared in the wall around the lock. Then, with a deep, shuddering crunch, a section of the reinforced wall buckled. The locking pins shot out of their damaged sockets, and the massive door swung inward with a defeated sigh. The air inside was freezing cold and motionless. Rows upon rows of towering shelves stretched into the darkness, filled with forgotten physical records. An automated archival drone, a spider-like machine with multiple optical sensors, zipped along a track in the ceiling, its red light sweeping across the silent shelves.
It patrols on a randomized path, Glick whispered, but its optical sensors have a refresh rate of just over a second. If you can block its line of sight at the exact moment it sweeps past, it will sweep past without registering you.
It was a puzzle of timing and nerve. Glick called out the drone's movements, his anxious voice a steady metronome. Stellan and Glick darted between shelves, while Breccia, with her deliberate movements, would step into the open at the right moment. Her wide, woody body eclipsed the drone's sensors long enough for the others to pass undetected. They reached the central chamber. There, on a pedestal in the middle of the room, sat a single object. It was a massive, leather-bound book, its cover worn and cracked with age. The first codex. As Stellan reached for it, a shrill electric alarm blared through the archive. They had been detected. "We're out of time," Stellan hissed, grabbing the book. It was immensely heavy. "Glick, find something, anything." Glick's eye stalks scanned the index with a speed born of desperation as the doors at the far end of the chamber slid open. A squad of Ordnate Enforcer drones marched in, their clamp limbs raised. His digits flicked across the ancient, brittle paper. "Looking for anything in particular?" Stellan asked, bracing for capture.
A Writer of Foundation review, Glick gasped. It was a theoretical legal concept mentioned in one of the historical texts. I never thought...
His digits stopped just as the drones surrounded them. His whole body went still. He looked up, his large eyes wide and luminous. He had found it.
Article 1, Subsection 1.
Glick breathed, his voice filled with a delirious, trembling excitement.
A law stating that any citizen may halt any proceedings to demand a full manual audit of the entire legal system to ensure its compliance with the original physical codex.
Stellan stared at him. Then his laugh started, growing from a chuckle into a loud, booming, echoing sound that filled the dusty, silent archive, even as the drones closed in. It was the most beautiful, glorious, bureaucratic nuke he had ever seen. The tribunal chamber was the architectural embodiment of judgment. It was a vast, cold amphitheater, with Stellan standing alone on a circular platform in the center. Above him, on a towering judicial throne, sat Senior Proctor Magistra. Her lacquered beige armature seemed to deaden the light, its surface a deep,
flat beige, and her expression was one of unwavering certainty. She was the system incarnate. Guards flanked Stellan, their impassive forms a promise of the inevitable. Auditor Pliny stood near the proctor's throne, his posture radiating sanctimonious triumph. Magistrar's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified by the sterile acoustics. It was a voice of pure, chilling logic, filled with conviction. "Stellan Boone," she began, gesturing to the heavy leather book now resting on the evidence table. "You stand accused of contempt of concordance and the theft of restricted archives. We have identified you as a chaotic agent, a source of systemic disruption. You have mocked our laws, instigated insubordination, and introduced dangerous levels of inefficiency into this facility. You are an uncomputable variable. In a system designed for order, you are the living embodiment of noise, and noise must be silenced." She paused, letting the weight of her condemnation settle. "This tribunal finds you guilty. The sentence is permanent incarceration in the Oblivion Ward, where your chaotic influence will be filed away. Permanently." Just as she was about to strike her gavel, a polished block of black basalt that promised a sound of finality, Stellan looked up at her. His face showed confidence. He was grinning. "I don't think you can," he said, his voice calm and clear. "Pursuant to the rights granted me as a citizen under Concordance law," Stellan announced, his voice ringing with newfound authority, "I hereby invoke Article 1, Subsection 1 of the Foundational Codex. I demand a full and immediate stop to all legal proceedings and formally request a manual audit of the entire Concordance legal system to ensure its compliance with the original text." A collective gasp went through the gallery. Pliny's vocalizer emitted a sharp, surprised click. Magistrar stared at the projected image, her composure cracking. Her optical sensors darted between the ancient text and the smirking human. She knew that law. It was a relic, a theoretical failsafe from the system's birth, long since buried under mountains of digital code. It had lain dormant. Its purpose was to remain dormant. But it was there, and it was the law. Her law. She turned to her console, her elegant styli for once moving with a slight tremor. She input a query, attempting to find a counter-ruling, an override. The station's central AI, the logical brain of the Grand Ledger, processed the command. A calm, synthesized tone echoed through the chamber, and a single message appeared on Magistrar's console and every other screen on the station. "Command accepted. Article 1, Subsection 1, Foundational Directive, initiating Protocol Omega, legal status. All judicial and enforcement functions are hereby suspended pending manual audit. All pending sentences stayed. All detainment orders placed under indefinite review. Compliance is mandatory." The legal justification for every single detainee on the station, based on a digital code that was now subordinate to its physical predecessor, instantly and utterly dissolved. Emergency alerts strobed across the station, signaling a new, overriding administrative state. Magistrar stared at Stellan with the stunned horror of a true believer whose God had just been proven false by its own scripture. For the first time, her flawless posture fractured. The one thing she held sacred had defeated her. The letter of the law, a power greater than force or chaos. The news rippled through the Grand Ledger like a shockwave, felt before it was announced.
The silent, oppressive hum of the station's administrative core gave way to the calm, steady pulse of the legal status protocol. The guard drones, their authority protocol nullified, froze in place, their beige armatures slumping into inactivity. The terminals that displayed case numbers and queue positions all defaulted to the same blinking message. All proceedings suspended. In the waiting hall, a single being, the little amphibious creature, let out a tentative cheer, then another. Soon, a rising tide of sound, the clicks, gurgles, hoots and cries of 100 different species tasting freedom for the first time in years, filled the vast, silent chamber. A slow, joyous, chaotic march began. Detainees poured out of the hall, heading for the impound bays. Their departure was a peaceful exodus. The guards stood by, motionless, their programming overridden by the stasis order. Their authority had vanished. Senior Proctor Magistrar, bound by her own unyielding protocol, could only watch from her silent chamber as her orderly world dissolved into a beautiful, liberating mess. Stellan walked out of the tribunal a free man. He found Glick and Breccia waiting for him. Glick was vibrating with joy, his serrata dancing in the air. Breccia's internal light was a brilliant, celebratory emerald green. They made their way to the impound bay where the spiteful Pelican was docked. The ship looked gloriously ugly and defiant in the sterile, beige hangar. As Stellan ran a pre-flight check, his friends approached the boarding ramp. Glick held out a cogni slate. "Your departure papers," he said, his voice brimming with pride. "Authenticated with all the proper digital signatures. When the legal stasis hit, the security firewalls crashed. I approved them myself while the system was rebooting." Breccia stepped forward, holding a heavy, irregularly shaped plate of hardened, petrified wood. It was a new hull plate, grown from a piece of her own body. Grown from its very substance, an etched and grinning angry pelican covered the surface. It was louder, uglier, and more magnificent than the painted original. "A non-regulation hull plate," she rumbled. "Visually disruptive." Stellan took it. The wood warmed to the touch. He looked at the gentle gastrine and the stoic knotwood. He had arrived alone, a cynical hauler motivated by boredom and spite. He was leaving with family. "Thank you," he said. "Both of you." "What will you do now?" Glick asked, his eye stalks drooping slightly at the thought of their parting. "I hear the station is going to need a whole new legal system," Stellan said with a wink. "Sounds like a job for a detail-oriented guy with a head for the rules. And someone to make sure they stay honest." Glick's entire body seemed to light up. Breccia emitted a low, resonant hum of approval. Stellan mounted the new hull plate on the wall of the cockpit, right next to the pilot's seat where he could see its reflection. He settled into the chair, the familiar worn cushions a welcome comfort. He glanced at the empty co-pilot's seat. The loss of Bess hit him, sharp and real. But a wave of warmth followed as he looked at the gift from his new friends. He fired up the engines. The jaunty, non-compliant hum filled the ship, a sound of cheerful rebellion. He gave his friends one last wave, then sealed the ramp. The spiteful Pelican lifted off the deck of the Grand Ledger, its mismatched colors a brilliant splash against the endless beige. Stellan steered his ship out of the hangar and into the open. He pushed the throttle forward, and the roar of his engines, a clear violation of the Auditory Serenity Pact, echoed through the system. He looked at his co-pilot's empty seat, then at the reflection of the new wooden pelican on the console. The corners of his mouth, so often pulled into a cynical smirk or a sarcastic grin, lifted into a quiet, unforced smile. He engaged the warp drive, and the spiteful pelican streaked away, leaving a trail of beautiful, liberating, and wonderfully uncivil disruption in its wake.